Hello, welcome to Workshop 30. This is online resources, remote monitoring, how COVID created learning opportunities, and what can we leverage moving forward. So I'd like to thank everybody very much for coming on the last day of conference. It's always hard to get up on the Saturday morning, so we appreciate you. Couple of housekeeping things is just we'll do question and answers through the app. I'm sure everybody's heard this at all the sessions, so I don't think I need to teach you how to do it. So we have heard a lot through the conference about the amazing and creative ways we provided care during COVID. Today, I hope we can wrap some of those discussions up and talk about what we can use moving forward, what was good, what was bad, what we're going to throw away, and what we're going to continue to use. So my name is Claire Smith. I'm a physiotherapist from Calgary, Alberta, Adult CF Clinic, and their research coordinator, and I have no disclosures.
And I'm Kim Keeling. I'm from Oregon Health Science University in Portland. I've had the pleasure of being a respiratory therapist for 30 years. That's a long time, so I'm probably been around longer than some of you have been alive. So I am also very fortunate that I am able to work with adult patients, and that's all I do. Not very many respiratory therapists get to do that, and so I do all the adult education and just pretty much everything that deals with CF. And it has, I get to retire as someone that has done CF her whole career, just about. And so with that, I think we're about ready to start. I think if we're ready, I would like to present Dr. Andrew Braun. He is an assistant professor of medicine and the director of the University of Wisconsin of Adult Cystic Fibrosis program. He completed an internal medicine residency at the University of California in San Francisco and clinical research fellowship in pulmonary critical care and sleep medicine at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland. He has a master's of health science degree in clinical investigations from Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. His little fun fact is he is a triplet, and he lived in France, and he was working with research, and that's how he come into CF. He learned it, and that's what got involved with CF was through his research in France. So that's his fun fact. Welcome.
Great. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. And I'm very honored to be able to be here today. I thank the moderators for inviting us to speak. Today I'm going to discuss the results from what some people may know as a 445-118 study. And as you can see, there are many co-investigators of which I'm sharing this work, and particularly want to highlight my co-PI, Nick Simmons from Royal Brompton in London. I have, here are my disclosures. So Alex-Tezaiva has been shown to be safe and effective in phase 3 clinical trials. At this conference, there's more information from the open label studies of Alex-Tezaiva and its continued safety and efficacy. And as we have proceeded with additional studies after marketing of the drug commercially, today I'm going to discuss the results of our phase 4 pilot study evaluating wearable technologies in assessing physical activity and cough frequency in patients who are treated with commercial product. And some of the highlights of this is that wearable technologies and additional outcome measures for cystic fibrosis studies was really well highlighted yesterday in our plenary number 2. Dr. Mayor Hamlet discussed how our classic outcome measures of FEV1 and change in exacerbation rate is going to be more difficult. So looking at other outcome measures, quality of life measures, and clinical outcomes that affect all of our patients is going to be important. Another component of this pilot study was that it was fully decentralized. All activities were performed remotely, and not only was that partially related to the COVID pandemic, but also a a future feature of studies that we can continue working towards. So in regards to study design, this was a fully decentralized study. Subjects needed to have a diagnosis of CF. This was an all-adult study. They were on stable regimens of Alex/Tezaiva commercially and needed to be on that for at least 4 weeks. Our FEV1 criteria was quite liberal. Patients needed to have an FEV1 greater than or equal to 30%. And of course, they needed to have an approved genotype with regards to the respective regional labels. Patients had a screening period of 4 weeks and then enrolled into the 12-week measurement period of the wearable technologies. And they continued Alex/Tezaiva throughout that 12-week period. And so the wearable devices that we looked at in this pilot study included actigraphy. And so here you see we use the Actigraph Center Point Watch. That's a medical grade actigraph that measures physical activity through movement. Subjects agreed to wear this for 24 hours a day continuously throughout the measurement period with only brief times off for charging. As you can see here, there was a time and a date that was on the actigraph. However, subjects weren't able to see, for example, their step counts or other objective data. And then our second wearable device that we looked at is known as the VitaliJack. That's a cough monitoring system. And so we measured cough non-invasively. There is both a microphone that is worn in the center of the chest and mechanic receptors that in previously validated studies have been shown to have good measurement of cough frequency. This was worn for 1 day per week during the 12 weeks of the study, so this was not a continuous monitor. The primary endpoint measures were compliance. So we were looking at feasibility of using these devices for future research and how well subjects could continue to wear this and adhere. So primary endpoint was the compliance with the Actigraph device. Secondary endpoints were the compliance with the cough measurement device. And then we took the opportunity, of course, to look at the objective data from these wearable technologies. So today I'll discuss the results of the step count and cough per day. We had 51 subjects who enrolled at 17 centers, 11 centers in the United States and 6 centers in the UK. As you can see, 46 subjects completed the study, and we had 5 that discontinued. 1 was due to an AE, particularly related to the device adhesive, and then the other reasons for discontinuation you can see here. And so our table 1 of the 51 subjects, about half were female and half were male. The mean age at screening was 34.6 years. This was not a particularly diverse population. And the mean FEV1 was 68.8% predicted. Each of the 17 centers enrolled 3 subjects, and we did not centrally mandate the FEV1 that was necessary to enroll, but we did suggest to try to have some degree of variation. And so you can see, based on the FEV1 categories, that we had a really nice distribution. So we had 6 subjects who had an FEV1 less than 40%, 37% of the population were between 40 and 70%, 29% between 70 and 90% predicted, and 21% greater than 90%. So here are the results in terms of compliance. So on the y-axis, you see the mean compliance, and on the x-axis, you see week by week what was that compliance throughout the study. And the overall mean compliance was very high. So for the Actigraph watch, this was 91.3% throughout the study. And you can really see week-to-week variability remained quite high, maybe a small attrition by week 12. And then the compliance with the cough measurement device. So again, this was worn 1 day per week, or actually a continuous 24-hour period per week, was a little bit lower. Overall mean compliance was 84.8%. The subjects did have to send the device in every 3 to 4 weeks. So you can see there's a little bit of variability once the coordinating centers were recognizing some decrease in adherence, and that probably speaks to the increase at different points during this study. So getting into the actual objective data that we were able to collect, so the mean step count week to week range from 4,400 steps per day to 5,500 steps per day. See, with a relatively varied standard deviation. To compare that to healthy individuals in general, kind of a healthy adult population, not actively exercising, you usually see a range of somewhere between 4,800 and 5,200 steps per day. This is a relatively small sample, 51 subjects, but within somewhat of a range that we would expect with healthy adults. And then with regards to cough frequency per day, here we use what's called the geometric mean when we're looking at an average, and that's because cough could be very skewed. Someone could have 1 per day, someone could have 500 per day. So you can see on the y-axis that there is some degree of a logarithmic scale of how we describe this statistic. But the geometric mean cough count ranged between 21 to 33 total coughs per day. And in previous data of healthy individuals, the mean cough count per day is 20. And actually in 2011, we have quite robust data from Karem's group that reported 643 coughs per day in our CF patients in a pre-modulator era. So 20 to 30 per day. I think many of us in our CF clinic hear our patients say things that I have no cough, I have minimal cough. And to see that objectively, again, in a pilot study as a secondary outcome is quite marked. In terms of safety during the study, 33 participants did experience an AE. The majority were mild to moderate severity. We had 6 participants with SAEs. All these were assessed to be not related to Alex-Tezaiva. The most common reactions that we saw were the skin-related reactions. As I had highlighted earlier, one person did drop out of the study due to that. Interestingly, this study was being performed at the time of the initial COVID vaccine rollout, so post-vaccination reactions were actually a somewhat common adverse event, and then pulmonary exacerbations, as with most CF studies. There were no deaths reported during this study. So in conclusion, the overall compliance with both the use of an actigraph device and the cough measurement device were very high. This definitely appears to be a feasible measurement that we could use in future CF studies. And actually, the use of these devices are being used and investigated in future studies. Of course, thinking about the right population to use that in a pre and post setting is quite important. The variability that we observed within step counts and cough counts are really consistent with previous reported norms. And then I think as highlighted, although this was a secondary outcome measure for us, the cough counts in participants on commercial drug using this cough sensor appropriately appeared to be within a mean of very close to what we would predict for healthy adults. Again, I would highlight too, this study was decentralized, it was fully remote. There were no on-site visits throughout this study, and I think research teams learned a lot about how to perform those, and I think that's a future avenue for a number of our CF research studies. And again, as highlighted yesterday in our plenary, looking at additional outcome measures in this post-highly effective modulator era, where FEV1 and rates of pulmonary exacerbations, it'll be needing a huge sample size to look at that. So investigating other outcome measures that we can use was a very strong experience from this trial. I'd like to acknowledge all my co-investigators, again, my co-lead PI, Dr. Simmons, our support for this with Drs. Blow and Edwards. And then I would really like to thank all of the research coordinating teams that participated in the study. Performing a fully decentralized study, these were technological devices, and some of the troubleshooting needed throughout the study was robust. And it was really a successful pilot study, and can provide additional information for future goals. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. It was a lovely presentation. I'd just like to ask one question before, as we wait for questions to come in. Is there any thought to doing a similar study pre and post start of Trikafta as opposed to just on Trikafta?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, retrospectively, some of this data would be amazing to have seen potentially in the pre-Trikafta era, and I can't speak directly as being involved in some of these Vertex studies in the future, but this is going to be used and evaluated in the future. And of course, there are areas across the world that still don't have great access to drug. So I think considering those populations as potential pre and post use would be a strong advocacy.
Were you able to correlate the cough with the FEV1 also? Were you able to?
So we don't have that for preliminary results here, but I think as we look forward to future publications and investigating additional outcome measures that are captured by the actigraph, that's something we'll look at.
What about a correlation between cough and steps?
I don't have any data to tell right now. That's a great question. The sample size is small, and this really was a pilot study looking at the feasibility of patients wearing it. And so the secondary outcome measures, we didn't power specifically to look for differences, but that's definitely a signal we can assess.
So there's a comment here that in a similar study with wearables that one of our audience is familiar with, there were concerns from the IRB about the cough monitor picking up confidential information or...
Yeah, so that's a great comment. So the cough sensor had a 24-hour continuous audio component to it, and that does pick up all audio signal that's occurring during the day. I won't go into detail, but one of the subjects who did drop out of the study did drop out due to concerns of that, and that was something during the consent process that we did discuss. The data analysis had ways to censor that type of additional information. So the analysis team works hard not to pick up any type of conversations that might provide some degree of challenge. But that was an important thing that we had to discuss with all subjects. Thank you kindly, sorry. Oh, so much better.
So another question from the audience. Great talk, thank you. How much troubleshooting and support was needed for the participants?
Well, admittedly, my research coordinators who are here could tell us specifically, but there were challenges with uploading data from modems, from charging devices, and in general, overall, I think that went relatively well based on what we expected, but of course, most research coordinators are also not IT specialists, and there was support to help throughout the study, but that was an important thing to think about for participation.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. So it's my absolute pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Pamela Scarborough. She's a physiotherapist who is the clinical director and co-founder of BEAM, which she's established more than 6 years ago. It's an online platform that offers live and on-demand exercise education and well-being sessions. My very special point about Pamela is that we graduated from the same university. So.
You know how to do that, sorry.
It's getting the first one rolling there that was the difficulty.
Yeah. So you just click this one when you're ready to move on,
Okay.
and then you can use your...
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me and for inviting me to be part of this session today. Can you hear me? All good? I'm feeling a bit like a fish out of water. I was a physio in the NHS for 15 years, but actually for the past, almost 7 years, I've been working in digital health. The project that I'm presenting on today is based on one of our recent services, functionality that we've delivered on the platform. So I'm feeling like my world has moved from being into a very clinical, very scientific world to being a startup digital health kind of world. And it was quite interesting just seeing how much those two worlds collided during the pandemic. So let me see if I can get this to work. No. Why is this not happening for me? What am I doing wrong? Oh, I'm used to a Mac, that's all. So, I'm discussing piloting and evaluating the impact of specialist online exercise programs on self-reported measures of health and exercise perceptions in adults with CF. Or as I called it for my poster, online exercise programs, do they work for people with CF? So as I said, I'm a physio by background. I'm also a yoga teacher, and I work on Beam, which I co-founded with my technical colleague 7 years ago. I'm supported with Beam through the CF Foundation, which makes it freely available to people in the US. The reason that I came about working in digital health, I do think is relevant in that, so as I said, I've been a clinician for 15 years. I just did my master's where I looked at yoga for adults with cystic fibrosis. I had to leave the NHS because I had very poorly family members that I needed to care for and 2 young kids. And I was really missing working in CF. One of my friends at the same time, coincidentally, has CF. She was needing a lung transplant, and I supported her, and we ran an online campaign to raise awareness of the shortage of organ donors. And during that campaign, we'd gone from they normally get around 5,000 hits a day on the website to the organ donor register. And during that process, they were getting 40,000 hits a day while we were running the campaign and people signing up. And I'd always had this belief that my role was to work one-to-one with patients. That's how I was going to change their behavior. That's how I was going to support them most efficiently and effectively. And it was through running this remote campaign, I realized that actually perhaps I could reach a lot more people with cystic fibrosis by offering a digital solution. So the solution that we developed was in existence way before COVID. The CF community have always been so open to online technologies, the use of forums for communicating with one another. And for me, like, the opportunity to deliver something digitally provides increased access to specialist care. And what we had been doing up until COVID was that we were offering on-demand videos and live classes, but this particular work that I'm going to be discussing was about packaging 12 classes together and supporting people through it. So why are we doing this? Well, the benefits of exercise on exercise capacity, pulmonary functioning, health-related quality of life for people with CF are well documented. We all know that. I don't need to discuss it further. COVID-19 limited opportunities for people with CF to undergo structured exercise programs in the hospitals. Maybe you'd previously been seeing them as outpatients. Maybe you'd been referring them to pulmonary rehab. Maybe their normal activity was to go to the gym or the leisure centre, and they were unable to do that. And maybe they're still limited in what they can do. Maybe you're still a little bit restricted in what you can do in a hospital setting. Maybe people are concerned about exercising in a gym environment. But also, not only have some people got ongoing concerns because of COVID, some people's behaviours have just changed. The opportunities that are open to them at home have changed more as well. So it's meant that online exercise programs are more commonplace. And we've curated 3 progressive on-demand exercise programs that were aimed at varying disease severity and baseline fitness programs. And I'm going to show you some of the self-reported data. I'm not in love with my slides, so I'm going to chat around it, so don't feel you have to be reading everything that's on there. The 3 programs that we created, one was a Getting Started program. So this was all about introducing people to different instructors, different movement disciplines, helping people discover movement that they love. So it's designed for people who, just have never really got into exercise, or as we prefer to call it, movement. We know that for people, especially who don't identify as exercisers, who aren't doing lots in the way of exercise, that using that word may disengage them. So it's help them to find movement they love. The Cardio Challenge program was for people with more mild, moderate disease. Again, people that we are direct to the community, the way that we are offering these, so using social media and so forth to engage. So we describe it as when we describe these programs, people are self-selecting as to which one they're going into. So the Cardio Challenge program we describe for people who are already have a good meeting physical activity levels and mild moderate disease, but they're looking to challenge themselves and build fitness. So whereas the first Getting Started program was of introducing lots of different movement disciplines and different instructors and of a more accessible, lower intensity programs, these Cardio Challenge ones were more high intensity interval training programs, and they were getting progressively harder. The Advanced Disease program was for people who are limited by breathlessness, may need oxygen to exercise, or are listed for transplant. So the exercises in this program, as per all the programs, have been developed by people working in cystic fibrosis, so PTs, or even some sessions are run by people who are living with CF and are qualified exercise instructors, but are getting clinical supervision to make sure they know about all the precautions and contraindications. So in the Advanced Disease program, it was more it was about using interval training, but we were also addressing relaxation, pelvic floor strengthening, postural work, and things like that. So each program was 12 sessions long and designed to be completed in 6 weeks. It's been created by CF experts, but we used content, because we did this quickly, we were using content that was already available to us on the platform. So it was on-demand content that already existed. If I'd had the money to invest and the time, I would have loved to have filmed these a new set of videos rather than using existing content. And in the future, I would love to collaborate with maybe some of you in this room on developing a progressive program. We don't have in CF, like what we do for COPD, we don't have a pulmonary rehab program that has an evidence base that we know we want to try and replicate. So I was literally, working with some other clinicians and pulling together the best kind of program with the content that we had available to us. The programs were designed to build strength and cardiovascular fitness, as well as improve CF symptom management and increase confidence to exercise. It's been an iterative process. We are a tiny team, and part of what I was saying about feeling like a fish out of water, when you're working in a startup world, it's not as nice and clean cut and strict methodology. We are constantly having to iterate and learn. And we do that in a quick manner. So it varied somewhat as to what support people were offered, and it was very much personalised. So if they said they wanted email or text support, that was what we did. We also learnt that if we gave them more supervision and accountability, that they were participating more so. So we started some small group workouts, which were cohorts, so people would come together to watch on-demand sessions with someone there to encourage them. So we asked people before and after to complete surveys, and these were just 5-point scales, asking question about general health, activity levels, emotional well-being, appetite and sleep, as well as the important things such as whether they enjoy exercise, whether they're confident to exercise, and what other limitations they may have. Excuse me. Between November 2021 and March 2022, we had 71 people who signed up for the Getting Started program. 36 of those completed a minimum of one class. So out of 71 people who signed up, we then only had 50% of those who actually went on to activate, to do the first class. That is obviously a massive drop-off. But these are people, it's a freely available program. They weren't given any hand-holding support at this stage. And that drop-off is actually what we see as quite normal. And if you talk to industry, like gym memberships, so where people do a 2-week free trial, and then how many percentage of those people go on to convert, you're looking at around about 40% of people will go on to activate. So we know exercise is a really hard thing to engage people in. We know that even if you give them full supervision and the most customized program possible, they may still struggle to engage. And of course, just because you're developing tech and it's easy to open the laptop, you still have to want to do it, and you still have to open that laptop. So it's very easy for people to drop off, especially if there's no accountability. So then out of that, we then had 16 people go on to complete the 12-session program. And then by May 2022, we had 22 people who'd completed the full program. These were the findings from the surveys that we did. I'm sorry that they're not broken down further. Too many deadlines all came together at the same time. So 66% of people felt stronger more fit, 76% of people felt more motivated, and 57% of people were happier. We know that there's a million other variables that can be coming into play here as to what might be affecting someone's health and well-being, plus the fact that I'd love to have the clinical evaluation as to whether the exercise program I pulled together was the right one. We also saw that 83% of people, their mental health was the same or improved. Overall health, 80% same or improved. 86% felt appetite was the same or improved, and 71 commented on their sleep. We've gone on to reevaluate this, to redesign the survey since then, and have incorporated the OR score to get more sensitive data. But my ideal would be to work with a centre and to collect some clinical data to complement it. This one for me, the enjoyment of exercise, the confidence, felt it wasn't so hard to fit in, and then their exercise symptoms. So we had some qualitative feedback as well. Love it, and I think a lot of them were those who did complete it. Obviously, they had different goals for doing it. They had different reasons for getting involved. So some people liked it because it saved time. Some people liked it because it pushed them. Some people liked it because they had accountability. Some people liked it because it was CF specific, or it was led by people who understand CF. There's no one size fits all when it comes to developing these programs, because we're all individual people and with different needs. The longitudinal data, as far as after those people had completed a session, did they carry on using the platform? Did they carry on exercising on Beam? We saw that 100% after 1 month after completing the program, 100% of those people were still active. It then dropped off to 63% at 2 months after completing the program, and then 41%. So to me, I look at this as from a technical point of view and digital health point of view. What nudges are we going to be doing to keep encouraging people to maintain their activity? So, my very broad, loose conclusions are, yes, it has the potential to increase, self-reported increase in strength and fitness. However, there needs to be a clinical trial to evaluate that. There's a lot of research and development that I would like to do to increase activation and completion of exercise programs with greater consideration to the behaviour change interventions. But I need to, it takes significant investment for any of us developing digital solutions to be able to do that. In the meantime, we have gone away, we've restructured and reviewed the content in the programs that were presented here to taking on people's feedback, and we've enhanced the email support that we send people, and we've also developed more cohorts, so those group sessions, so that people can have that social interaction and accountability, and enhance the information captured on the survey. Thank you.
That was really nice. I do have a question. Did you have patients that maybe overreached and you had to let them know maybe this is a little bit tougher than what, or maybe underreached? Was there a way to be able to help them achieve their goals that way?
Because people were self-selecting into the program, I wasn't having, we didn't have contact with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
It was only if they selected it. So I don't feel I can actually answer that question. No one dropped out, we followed up with everyone. No one dropped out of the program because of any adverse events. But I can't say that people dropped out because they overstretched themselves. No, sorry.
All right, a couple of questions from the audience.
Yeah, it's such a different world, like online exercise, or exercise outside of a clinical setting versus, it's in digital health. So I also work with people with prostate cancer and kidney disease through the platform too, and there can be lots of concerns around the exercise intensity people are working to and the safety elements. And we do have to rely on lots of self-reported data. I'd love to do more to integrate wearables so we can get more activity data. But then there is an element of, letting people do what they want to do. Because if people aren't coming to the clinical environment, then they're going to a gym or their local leisure centre or exercising on their own and maybe doing who knows what. So I kind of, we give a lot of guidance around what is how exercise should be feeling when you're doing this, what's moderate intensity, about setting goals, rather than necessarily checking in on everything.
All right, this is from the audience. You mentioned about future collaborations. What is the best way to go about this?
From my perspective, future collaborations, the work that I've done so far, I've done a significant amount of work with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, and we have piloted at 4 different care centres here in the US. And then more recently, we've been working with Johns Hopkins on developing content for children with CF. As far as future collaborations, I would love to be able to work with a centre to do a clinical trial where we're able to get some exercise data and some health outcomes at different stages, and to be able to evaluate, the emotional and the physical impact that it's having on people's health outcomes.
Let's see here. Have you been in contact with the CF Canada? Where'd it go? CF Canada regarding funding for BEAM for CF clinics in Canada as a PT for the patients in my CF clinic. BEAM is not free of charge, which limits participation or utilization entirely.
I have. I had a meeting yesterday as well with another Canadian clinician who was asking the same question, and yes, I'd love to find a way to continue to offer the service. We're currently supporting 1,200 people in the US and have the potential to support a lot more, and it's all about working together to be able to make that happen.
This is an interesting question. This is a fantastic program. And have you considered using the home spirometry?
Love to.
Yeah, that would be really good.
I'd love to. Yeah, yes. I'm having lots of interesting conversations with. I think I'm really home spirometry. Yes, activity levels, cough. And also I think the mental health side of things as well. Like exercise, we know is more important than ever with the people gaining weight, with the mental health challenges people are facing. The fact that we can use exercise to enhance people's emotional well-being and provide the opportunity for the CF community to connect is so important as well. So yeah, I'd love to collect more broader data.
And then, are you considering creating a Beam app?
Again, there's like 4 of us, and we're bootstrapped, and we have no money, so I do the best I can, and I'd love to get an app for your patients. We got one, it was funny, we got a grant, and we got it so far, and it was just about to be launched, and then COVID happened. And then because COVID, obviously meant that the acceptability of digital health and everything changed so rapidly, the app that we developed was outdated. And so yes, I'd love to develop an app, and I'd love to develop a much more personalized. I could talk about this stuff all day. There's so many learnings around, and for all of you as well who are delivering remote services, around how we can continue to better and personalize people's experiences so that it feels tailored to them and is more engaging, because people can drop off. It does, you think it makes it easier in one breath, but on the other hand, it's challenging. And I think the more that we can do to personalize people's experiences, as you do in a hospital setting, figuring out their goal setting, curating their care just for them. There's a lot of online solutions that can be given that can feel quite overwhelming, and people don't know where to start, and they don't know if it's safe, and they don't know if it's relevant. And the more that you can do to present people with the right information for them, the more, and the right sessions for them, the better the outcome. And that's something that I'd love to do with an app. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, our next speaker is Jennifer Edelschick. She is a PT and all the other initials that go behind that. And she's a specialist in pediatric physical therapy with 21 years of experience in the acute pediatric setting. She obtained both her master's and doctorate of physical therapy from Duke University. She's the coordinator for acute pediatric PT and OT at the Duke Health and co-director of pediatric PT residency. She loves little ones from 0 to 3 months, or 3 years, because they're so much fun. Her favorite place in the world is Tuscany because she loves food, she loves the climate, and she is a people watcher. So welcome, Jennifer. And then what you'll do, you can just do it right here, arrows. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. First, I want to apologize that I don't have the wonderful accent. She's so wonderful to listen to all of the time. But so at Duke, we recently completed a pilot study where we were looking at exercise, quality of life, and pulmonary function in adolescents and adults with CF after monitored activity. That didn't happen. Let's see. I have nothing to disclose. And I think we all understand the research is pretty clear on the benefits of exercise in the general population. And 2020 WHO guidelines on physical activity and sedentary behavior analyzed all of the current evidence and showed that exercise is critical for bone health in children, mortality in adults, and mental health. It's critical for children and adults, and that includes anxiety and depression. They also found that it is important for health-related quality of life in adults. And I think everyone is aware of their current exercise and activity guidelines for adults and children. But the evidence isn't quite as clear-cut when you're looking at exercise and CF. There are a lot of studies out there that demonstrate the benefits of exercise, including improvements in exercise capacity, strength, pulmonary function, quality of life, thoracic mobility, and a decrease in morbidity, mortality, and inflammation. But then there are other studies that show no benefit to exercise at all. And the recent Activate study that showed that if you had high intensity exercise, it might actually lead to a decrease in FEV1. So a lot of these studies are relying on patient report of exercise at home, which we know isn't always accurate. And then there are other studies that suggest that using wearable technology like step counters and accelerometers can motivate patients and also remind them to exercise. So we decided to use an activity tracker in order to help motivate patients as well as provide an accurate account of the exercise that they're doing at home. And our hypothesis was that exercise assessed by increased heart rate using a wearable fitness activity tracker will improve quality of life and physical function in adolescents and adults with CF. And this pilot study, the main objective was just to assess the feasibility of using wearable technology to encourage and monitor activity. We also wanted to study the effects of 10 weeks of exercise on pulmonary function, endurance, quality of sleep, and quality of life. So this was a 12-week pilot study, and we started planning it prior to COVID, but we had a lot of delays and technical things to work out, and then COVID happened. So we didn't start enrollment until April of 2021, and we enrolled for a year until April of 2022. This ended up being perfect timing, though, because it allowed us to have remote monitoring during the pandemic. So patients were given an activity tracker watch. We used the Garmin Vivo Smart 4 watch, and they were asked to wear it at all times unless they were charging it. And then the first 2 weeks of the study, we asked them to do their regular activity and not try to increase activity at all, and we just monitored what their baseline activity was. For the next 10 weeks, we asked them to exercise 150 minutes a week. Excuse me. We collected outcomes at baseline, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, and 12 weeks. And we used their regular clinic visits at baseline and 12 weeks. Our inclusion criteria were our study design. We provided support to patients to increase their adherence to exercise at home by giving them a handout. It explained a lot of benefits of exercise. It also provided them with links to online videos that they could do at home where they didn't need any equipment to do that. We didn't want their environment to at all influence their ability to participate. We also instructed them in how to start a run-walk program based on their current level of fitness. They all received an email each week that encouraged them to participate in the exercise. It gave them an online link to a video that they could watch and exercise with that week. It also, if we noticed that they weren't exercising the week before, we would give them encouragement and tips on how to better utilize their watch. And then if we noticed for 2 weeks that they weren't exercising, we would actually call them and figure out what the barriers were and see if we could troubleshoot that. So our inclusion criteria are patients with CF who are diagnosed, who are 10 to 25 years old, sorry about that. If they were a pediatric patient, they also had to have a caregiver who was encouraging them to participate in exercise throughout the 12 weeks. Our exclusion criteria is anybody who didn't have access to the internet or a smart device, anybody who had a chronic illness or just an injury that precluded their ability to exercise, if they weren't able to follow directions and complete the baseline measurements, they were excluded, and if their oxygen saturations were less than 90% at rest. So we collected data at their baseline and 12-week visits, including height, weight, and BMI. Their PFTs were collected, the FEV1, FVC, and FEF25-75. And we performed the 1-minute sit-to-stand test, collecting the number of repetitions, their heart rate and oxygen saturation at rest, and at the end of the test, and 1-minute recovery. And they completed 3 questionnaires, the GAD-7 for anxiety, PHQ-9 for depression, and CFQ-R for quality of life. These 3 questionnaires were also collected electronically at 4 and 8 weeks. The watch data was updated to an app on their phone, a Garmin app on their phone, and unlike Eleanor from Thursday's talk about Project Physio, we did not have 4 data scientists to review our data for us. So we partnered with a third-party company called PhysioQ. And so the patients downloaded the PhysioQ app on their phone as well, and their data was sent from the Garmin app to the PhysioQ app, and they consolidated all of the data to provide us with weekly information, and there was no identifying patient information. Everybody was just assigned a number through PhysioQ. So the data we received from them was total minutes a week spent exercising, and we broke that down into 40 to 60% of their max heart rate, 60 to 80%, and 80 to 100%. Their average sleep per night was also recorded and then broken down into average minutes of deep sleep, light, and REM sleep, and the average number of minutes spent awake during their sleep time. Our goal was to enroll 20 participants, but at the end of a year, we ended up with a total of 17 participants. And during the course of the study, 8 participants withdrew. The reasons for withdrawal included issues with the wearable technology, family or social situations that developed during the course of the study, and a lack of desire to complete the study. And there was one person who lost their phone and just didn't want to reset it all up on the new phone. So we found no significant differences in any of these variables, including all of the sit-to-stand variables and PFTs. However, we did find a significant difference in anxiety and between baseline and 12 weeks. The most improvement was seen at 8 weeks, and with this particular questionnaire, a lower number means less anxiety. So we found this really interesting given that during the pandemic, there were so many people who reported increased anxiety. We also saw significant improvement in CFQ-R in the physical domain and the emotional domain. And for this measure, a higher number actually indicates improvement. And here are the patient plots for the physical and emotional domain. You can see that for the physical domain, they gradually increased over time throughout the study. And for the emotional domain, their improvements peaked at 4 weeks, but still remained significantly better at 12 weeks compared to baseline. And since our biggest aim was to see how easily we could use this wearable technology, our main lesson learned was that it was very difficult for us to use, at least for the wearable technology we were using. We had a lot of trouble. The watch actually didn't always capture exercise events. And so we would have people call us and say, you know, I went for a 30-minute jog, and when I came back, the watch said I didn't exercise at all. So we did question the reliability of the watch to give us the data that we needed. We had difficulty with the watch and app setup frequently. We had subjects who forgot to sync their watch to the app on their phone, especially if their parent had the watch, had the phone, and they weren't always near their parent. It didn't automatically sync. One subject had a skin reaction to wearing the watch, and she switched and wore it on the other wrist, and then she had a reaction on that wrist as well and ended up withdrawing from the study. And some subjects just don't like to wear a watch 24/7. So despite the accountability with having a watch to remind you to exercise and knowing that the CF Center is watching to see if you're exercising, and despite weekly emails and occasional phone calls, we still had issues with adherence to exercise and retention in the study. And so future research could be aimed at improving participant retention and compliance in exercise studies. I think we've learned all week how difficult that is. In one study, they actually went and picked the patient up once a week for exercise and still couldn't get very high adherence to that. So another thing that I think would be interesting is looking at the various types of wearable technology and seeing how accurate they are at recording heart rate during exercise. I'd like to thank the members of our CF Center team, especially our study PI, Dr. Mayal Mala, our study coordinator, Constanza Carney, our social worker, Gail Yasher, our pediatric coordinator, Caitlin Suggs, and our research assistant, Rania Sufni. These are my references, and are there any questions? Thank you. Before we go to questions, I can tell you that I whizzed right through. We had no significant improvements in any of our sleep data as well. There are 2 slides up here, and it's very confusing for me to figure out which one I'm looking at.
Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Thanks.
We're waiting for some questions to come in, so I have one for right now. Did you have any issues with your IRB around patients downloading a third-party app onto their personal devices and that data sharing?
We didn't have any issues with the data sharing for the third-party app. The third-party app, PhysioQ, they had worked with research before, and they had all of their paperwork in order, and they could demonstrate how they weren't accessing any patient data other than these variables from the watch, and they had no other identifying patient information. And then when they shared that with us, they sent it to a secure box. So all of the data, I think, was kept secure throughout.
Did you ask, was one of the questions that you asked if they were on other studies like the Simplify or any of those other studies when they were participated with the study?
We didn't ask if they were on any other studies. They weren't on any other exercise studies at the time.
So there's a question here. Vital signs taken via fingertip pulse ox, or did you use forehead, earlobe? I find it tough to get accurate during exercise.
I agree. It was tough, and it was with fingertip.
Is there a reason you chose Garmin?
Oh, it's been so long. I'm sure there is. So we thought about looking at just step count or things that could, Garmin actually has another version of this watch that would just tell you whether you exercised or not, but they didn't use heart rate to determine it. They used like how fast your arm was moving at the time. And so we wanted to get something that was accurately showing heart rate. And another group at Duke, a different department at Duke, had used Garmin in the past. And so when I talked to them about their study, I think I went with Garmin because they did.
Oh, so sorry, I didn't see this on the slides. I apologize if it was there. Did anyone have a drop in FVC, FEV1?
So there was nothing statistically significant. Let me see if I can find here. So you can see the baseline and 12-week FEV1 average. We didn't list it out per patient. So it looks like there's a small drop in the FEV1, but it isn't statistically significant.
And another question, what was the actual data for how much time participants spent exercising versus the 2.5 hours you requested?
That is a very good question. Not very much. So we never had a week where any of the participants exercised 150 hours. We had many participants who exercised 0 hours, 0 minutes. And so our sample size was so small, we weren't able to correlate those who did exercise and what their outcomes were compared to the people who didn't exercise. And so we couldn't see if the positive sort of increase in their emotional well-being was due to those who exercised more or not. But it was very low. I should have actually included that because it would have been very interesting to see sort of the average number of minutes exercised for each subject throughout the 10 weeks.
Okay, and what type of exercise videos did you send to the patients each week? Did you create them specifically for your study?
I didn't create them at all. I found them on YouTube, and I just tried to have a variety of styles of exercise so that they would, my hope was that they would try them all, kind of like Pamela was saying, and find the thing that interests them the most. But I think that in general, 1 or 2 patients actually tried out the videos. Most people just chose another form of exercise when they did. Thank you.
So our next speaker today is Emma Raywood. She's a respiratory physiologist specializing in pediatric lung function at UCL Great Ormond Street Institute of Child Health. Her PhD was carried out as part of Project Physio, and the particular area was airway clearance physio in children and young people with cystic fibrosis, the impact of gaming, and the effect of adherence on clinical outcomes. But more importantly, I think we need to congratulate Emma for making it to the top 5 of the junior investigators at NACF today. Come on up, Emma. So you just need to click this for your first move, and then you can go forwards, backwards with the arrow, please.
I have no disclosures related to this presentation. Hi. This work was carried out as part of my PhD, which is Project Physio, looking at the effects of quantity and quality of daily airway clearance techniques on lung function in children and young people with CF. We've got 2 other abstracts at this conference you can get to with that QR code about physical activity and our data science methods. But this presentation focuses on the airway clearance techniques. Hopefully you're all aware of airway clearance techniques. They're recommended for all people with cystic fibrosis. There's many different techniques. Some of them are pictured here, and usually people do them twice a day for about 20 minutes a day. So that can take about 250 hours a year of their life, so maybe 20 full waking days. So, it's quite a big burden, and we know from Question CF, people with CF do find them a big burden. So we need to make sure that these treatments are clinically effective. So Project Physio, we were trying to find out the extent of clinical benefit of ACTs. In the UK, the most common way that children do airway clearance techniques is with positive expiratory pressure or oscillatory positive expiratory pressure devices. So 76% of children and young people with CF use a device like that for their physiotherapy. So that's what we assessed during Project Physio. During the study, we gave participants a chipped sensor to record every breath of every treatment they were doing for 16 months. And it attached onto 4 commonly used ACT devices, the Aerobica, Acapella, Astrotech, and Paripep. And these were the most common devices at the 3 recruiting sites. So we recruited from 3 London CF centres. Participants used a computer tablet with an app we developed for the study to sync this data every day, and we processed it in a Physio Cloud and then further in a secure digital research environment, the DRE, where we could also use longitudinal clinical records. And as well as recording the quantity of treatment. So usually when people go to clinic and their physiotherapy is assessed, their physiotherapist might ask, how much treatment have you done? Did you do your treatment, yes or no? We could also assess the quality of treatment. So the way we analysed the data was for every treatment we recorded, we could see every day of treatment, we could see how many treatments someone had done. So for example, if they'd done their prescription, if they'd done more, if they'd done less, if they'd done no treatment. But as well as just looking at the quantity, we could also, for the first time using this sensor, look at the quality of the breath of every single treatment. So a treatment might look like this. We've got 10 sets of 10 breaths each with gaps for huffing and coughing. And we could measure the length of the treatment, the length of the breaths, the pressure and the number of the breaths, the length. We could get so much data about the quality of those treatments. And what we could see is each breath, we saw a huge variety of different breath profiles, which we were quite surprised by. So we recently published this data in the Journal of CF, looking at the baseline 2 months of the study. And what you can see is that some participants did very high pressure, short duration breaths. Some participants did very long, low pressure breaths, and they were very kind of unique to them, but also the inherent device characteristics of their chosen PEP device. And in the guidelines, PEP is recommended to be at about 10 to 20 or 25 centimetres of water, sustained mid-expiratory pressure. But you can see from these different examples, for example, A, it's way above that 10 to 20. We were getting breath pressures, over 70 centimetres of water in some children, and other children way below 5 centimetres. Some of these breaths were so long, you couldn't describe them as, you could describe them as sustained, but they were definitely not at tidal volume. They were so long. So what we could do with our data is classify it not just by the quantity, so are you doing a treatment, yes or no, but we could also assess it in terms of quality. Did it meet the guidelines from international guidelines for how to do PEP? So all the data we recorded, we analysed, and we could look at the number of breaths, but we could also look at if each treatment was made of good quality breaths that met the guidelines, or what we call poor quality breaths that didn't meet the guidelines. And the way we analysed this compared to clinical outcomes was we looked at an extrapolated FEV1% predicted from individualised polynomial regressions. And that is a whole other talk, which I hope you'll go to after this session. And Nicole will discuss that method in more depth and in more detail. Basically, we had daily airway clearance techniques, but we had FEV1 sampled much less frequently, so this was how we got around that. And then what we did was we used a linear mixed effects model accounting for significant confounders, so disease severity, age, IV antibiotics, and modulator therapy use, to look at the effect of these features of ACT on clinical outcomes FEV1. So our results, on the left we've got this heat map, and what this is showing is each row is each participant in our study and the number of ACT treatments they were doing a day. There's quite a lot of grey. A lot of these participants weren't doing regular treatments or doing 1 or 2 treatments a day. And when we put that into our linear mixed effects model and we looked at the weeks with no ACT and the weeks with any ACT, they're very similar plots. And actually doing any ACT was not associated with an improved FV1, which is so disappointing. These people are spending hours and hours of their lives, and there's no effect on the FV1. So then what we were able to do, instead of just saying, is quantity important, we could look at the quality for the first time. So now we've gone technicolor, and what we can see is the same data, so each row is a person. Blue points indicate poor quality treatments. So we've got some participants who are showing up every day, they're doing their treatment, but they're not meeting the guidelines, they're not doing their physiotherapy as they've been told to do. And then the green is people meeting those guidelines and doing good quality ACT. Of the data we recorded, actually only 22% of it could be classified as meeting the guidelines as good ACT. And we wanted to see if this is important. So here we go. Everyone get ready to get excited. So the figure on the left is the daily effect of the quality of airway clearance techniques. And what you can see is doing poor quality ACT is the same as doing no ACT for FV1. But doing good quality ACT has a positive effect. So it really matters how these children are doing their treatments. And the plots on the right are looking at a weekly level. So on the left, doing the plot from the last figure, the last slide, showing no ACT. But then if we separate out any ACT into poor and good, you can see with good ACT, the more good treatments you do a week, the bigger the effect on FEV1. And the more poor treatments you do a week, it has a lower FEV1. So it's even more important that we can empower people to be able to do treatments the right way. And if we look at that a different way, so the black line is doing any ACT. That's every physiotherapy study that's ever been published. Did you do your treatment, yes or no? And it's flat. But if we separate out good quality in blue, in green, and poor quality in blue, you can see there's a real effect of quality on the clinical outcomes. So in summary, 145 children and young people with CF recorded over 55,000, I forgot to say that. We recorded over 55,000 treatments, and it's actually 3 million breaths we analysed. So it was a lot of data. And regular good quality ACTs were more important than just doing any ACTs and improving the FV1. But the vast majority of children did not regularly achieve good quality. Some were always showing up every day and doing their treatments, but they weren't doing good quality treatments. So they may not realise that their techniques are poor. And these findings have got implications for how we teach, measure, report, monitor ACTs. We need to give people the tools so they can achieve effective treatment every single day that has a benefit to their health. And this whole project wasn't just me. Obviously, we're really thankful to all our participants for recording their treatments every day for 16 months. And to do that, we had a huge team of people. There's over 100 names on this slide. People developed the app and the sensor and our data science and did the clinical recruiting, and we're really thankful. And if you want to see the other abstracts, you can scan this QR code. But basically, the take-home message is there is a clinical benefit if you do airway clearance correctly in line with the guidelines. But the majority of children we assessed were not doing it in a way that leads to the most clinical benefit. So we need to be able to empower them. And I think with COVID and remote monitoring becoming more common, it's a real important time for us to be able to do that.
Thank you so much, Anna. That was an excellent talk, and congratulations on managing to enroll and keep people in a study for 16 months. That's pretty impressive. It was a long study, so it must have overlapped with the approval of ETI. Did you notice any impact of that moment in time in both quality or quantity?
It came right at the end of the study, so it didn't massively overlap. By the time it'd gone for approvals and people had actually got it, the study had finished for a lot of them. But we did account for modulated therapy in our model, so if they'd started it, that would be accounted for.
So the big question, what suggestions do you have for us all to improve? how we teach, what we teach.
Yeah, I think the thing that we were really surprised by was how much of the data was not meeting the guidelines, because the 10 to 20 mantra is strong. Everyone knows it, but actually the devices that the children were using, they don't always have a way to assess the pressure or the breath profile, if it's sustained or if it's short. So I think hopefully using these data, we can get an idea better of what is the optimal technique and be able to feed it back to people so they can achieve that routinely. Maybe an app with like live feedback of their breath pressure or something like that. I think it'd be really important.
Yeah, it really shows how important the education is. Was there any way to follow up with our the patients going backwards and re-educating? I know modulators have kind of taken away, and COVID sort of took away our ability to work with our patients, but this really shows how important it is what we do. It's really important that we continue working with our patients and the techniques.
Yeah, and I think all the physios, clinical physios we worked with are brilliant, and they had given their patients that training. And I think some of it is down to the devices they were used, which is covered a bit more in our paper, that it was associated with various devices, kind of the breath profiles, and some of it is to do with the child themselves. They just want to get their treatment done, so they do it really fast and race through. So yeah, I think it's really important to give physios the tools to be able to see treatment this way as well.
A couple of questions from the audience. Can a PEP device be modified to produce the real-time feedback to user or quality of ACT?
Yeah, that's what we did. So we didn't change the function of the PEP device. We added a sensor to it so it could measure the pressure without changing the function, and then it linked by Bluetooth to our app. So if you know how to make an app and a sensor. So yeah, I think in the future maybe devices need to come with something like that, so you can ensure.
Do you have plans to do educational intervention to see if you can improve the quality of those with the different?
Yeah.
Are you going to follow up with?
Yeah, we'd like to do something like that and involve adults as well, because this was only in children, so we're just scraping the surface, and there's so many different ways ACT is done. I think it's important that we get more information on all of them, because it's going to be important for people going forward now, modulators more than ever, who want to stop their treatments. If they're stopping doing good quality treatments, will that have a negative effect? But if they stop doing any treatment, will that not? Because obviously there's a relationship with that.
What was the age range of your participants and any impact of the age or quality of the treatment?
So they were between 6 and 16. There was a slight association that some of the younger children achieved higher pressures, but that I think was related to the devices they were using. They were more commonly using a cappella. Yeah. Oh, we carried for age in our model as well.
Yeah. Let's see here. And then REACT program assesses this technique. I guess it's all that it is.
I think that's a comment maybe from
Yeah, comment. Just a
Yeah.
comment. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Another comment that was made that I agree with was past airway clearance trials don't consider competence as part of the measuring adherence, and I think in the future this should be and your study shows this, that
so
should
important.
Be something to include in these to make these studies more objective.
Yeah, I
That
think
was very well done.
Yeah, it's not take a blue pill, take a red pill. It's how you do it, how you participate. We've seen that with the exercise studies as well. Like, it's not just showing up, it's getting involved, isn't it?
I have to say that's one of the things this pandemic has done, is it has shown us things that we may not have been aware of, having our patients at home and not being able to work with them one-on-one. It's opened our eyes to a lot of things.
Thank you so
Well
much.
done.
Thank you.
We are on the home stretch. Our next presenter is Mehak Galati. She is currently a clinical research coordinator working on COVID-19 and severe asthma clinical research trials at Michigan Medicine. She spent 3 years coordinating patient care and aiding in research in the Cystic Fibrosis Center whilst completing her degree in molecular, cellular, and developmental biology at the University of Michigan. She's also speaks 3 languages, Spanish, Hindi, and English. I'd like to welcome her, and we'll pull her up right now. Oops. Yeah, you want it?
This layout. No, down. There. That way. Keep going. Keep going. There we go. No.
All right, thank you for letting me present today. I am going to be talking about the efficacy of home respiratory culture kits and whether we can use these in the future as a viable tool in replacement of clinic-collected cultures. And then I have no disclosures. Okay, so as with the start of the pandemic, things shut down rather rapidly for us, and we were kind of scrambling to figure out how we were going to get routine data collection from our patients, whether it was home spirometry, cultures, labs, routine scans, that sort of thing. And so it kind of came to us around October, November of 2020 that we were going to send patients home respiratory culture kits to collect sputum or throat swabs themselves. As in accordance with CFF guidelines of having at least one annual culture, preferably more. And so our purpose really was to evaluate whether these were accurate and that whether we could use these in the future, considering that virtual care is going to be sticking around for quite a long time. So we did hypothesize that sputum samples would be rather consistent with the result of clinic-collected sputum samples. I think patients are well accustomed to having to collect their own sputum for many years. In clinic, they kind of know the sample size, what it's supposed to look like, that sort of thing. But we did predict that self-collected throat swabs would provide false negatives, as it can be a little bit more challenging for patients to collect their own throat swabs. So we sent about 200 home culture kits to patients, and we provided them with the option of collecting sputum or collecting a throat swab. And we did provide collection instructions along with the clinic contact information. So nurses, MAs, other staff were always available to answer questions or even walk participants through how to collect their sputum or throat. So we retrospectively collected data for about a year, December 2020 to December 2021, and ended up with about 77 different sample pairs. So we looked at the result of home collected samples, whether these were returning positive or negative, the presence of microorganisms, and also whether they decided to use a throat or a sputum culture. And then we analyzed in pairs and used a Cohen correlation coefficient for analysis. So we ended up with about half of the participants ending up with a throat versus sputum in clinic. It was pretty evenly split, and we've kind of seen this shift towards more throat cultures in clinic, especially with the emergence of Trikafta and patients feeling well and not coughing up as much sputum. But it did at home see a little bit more sputum collection than throat collection, which can make sense given that throat is a little bit harder to collect. So total, again, 77 total pairs analyzed, which gave us a return rate of about 38.5%. It's a little bit higher than we were expecting, but it is still considerably low, given the amount of patient outreach that we did. We did invest significant amount of time in sending out these kits, and they are a significant amount of money as well. We would send these to patients, package them ourselves, and we would have like a mail collection, kind of pick these up, bring them back to a U of M laboratory site to be analyzed. So it was a fair amount of coordination. So we would have liked to see a little bit higher of a return rate. When we look at the results overall, so a correlation coefficient, a higher correlation coefficient means better agreement in this case, and the lower one means not very good agreement. So we can see when we're looking at all cultures overall, we are seeing very similar positivity rates, as in these cultures, about like 80% of them were returning as positive. There are organisms detected. But we can see a fair level of discordance when we look a bit closer. And discordance meaning like samples that are not matching up. You're getting different results, different organisms collected at home versus in clinic. And so when we look at different collection methods, so sputum versus throat cultures, these are patients who collected sputum in clinic and then had a throat culture at home or vice versa. We're finding that, again, similar positivity rates, but when you're looking at the microorganisms themselves, for example, Pseudomonas, we see pretty good agreement. We have a pretty high coefficient there. But when we're looking at staph, we are seeing a bit more moderate agreement. And then we can kind of see a couple different results. So when we're looking at same collection methods, so patients that are collecting sputum in clinic and also collecting sputum at home, this is probably our most consistent cohort. We had about half of our participants who ended up having 2 sputum samples, and we can see pretty high agreement with this. So the results of the sputum were very consistent, but when we look at kind of throat versus throat cultures, so patients who are collecting throat cultures in clinic and also at home, we're seeing probably our highest level of discordance, about 20 to 40%. And we are seeing that certain organisms are detected versus not. For example, for Pseudomonas, we have very low correlation coefficient. It's not really as detected. You know, we do have a bit of a low sample size in this cohort, which kind of could be influencing things, but regardless, we're not seeing very much agreement. And then for staph, we have a fair amount of moderate agreement. So it does kind of influence, the collection technique can influence results for certain microorganisms is kind of what we found. Okay, so our main takeaways, so clinic and home kits are providing similar positive results. We are seeing that, we are detecting microorganisms, but discordance is varying pretty significantly through our cohorts, about 10 to 30%. This could be kind of due to natural fluctuations in cultures. Like I said, there's a bit of small sample size in some of them as well. And we weren't regulating the time of day that patients were collecting these samples. So patients could collect these in the morning when they were maybe getting a better sputum sample, or versus in the afternoon when maybe they've been kind of up and about for a little bit and don't have as much. But regardless, we are seeing that collection technique can influence these results, and our return rate is pretty low considering the amount of time that we invested. And this was a little bit to be expected. I think a lot of patients are very burdened with a lot of aspects of their care. They have been doing this for quite a while, and the COVID pandemic is a little bit hard to reach them. Some of them actually have the U of M number blocked, so it's a little bit hard to reach them. But still, I think we would like to improve this, considering that culture data is very important for us in determining antibiotic selection and helping with exacerbations. So that does kind of lead us to what we'd want to do in the future. This abstract solely focused on whether these culture kits are effective, if they're accurate, but we do want to go a little bit further and see, go back and retrospectively collect to see whether we use like a clinic collection versus like a home collection in determining antibiotic selection, and what kind of the outcome was. Was a patient treated with outpatient oral antibiotics, or did they require hospitalization and IV? So that's something we are really interested in looking at in the future. And then still kind of brainstorming more ways to improve patient outreach and compliance, and see whether the current workflow we have is sustainable. At some point, we were having pretty much all of our staff contact these patients, including physicians, and this can be, kind of stretch a lot of us thin. And we don't necessarily know if that is sustainable, but we really do want this culture data from patients. And so just kind of brainstorming more to see what we can do in the future. And that is it for me.
So we've struggled with this in our clinic. In Oregon, there's a lot of rural area, and so we have patients that live 300 some miles away, and so we do a lot of virtual clinics, and trying to get sputums on our patients that live so far away, it's been a struggle, and so we were really looking forward to this discussion. So with that said, about what was the percentage again of collections that came back out of?
Yeah, it was about 38%. Yeah.
And then and did you use a particular company for mail company and pre-printed?
I want to say it was UPS. I could be wrong, but I do want to say we coordinated with them to pick up samples within 24 hours of collection. So a patient would have to call.
So some questions from the audience. Do you have any idea of cost of sending the kits out per patient?
Yes, I believe it was $50. It has been a while. It could be a little bit more, but it was at least $50 per patient.
Okay. And another one, what was the time gap between home and clinic samples?
Yeah, so we collected as close together as possible. So ideally, it would only be a few months. But some patients hadn't been seen in quite a while, especially with our clinic shut down for a little bit during the pandemic. So ideally within the year.
Yep. We have no more questions unless somebody doesn't like to use the app. No? All right. Thank you so much. So Kim and I would like to thank you all again for coming on a Saturday morning, and we hope you enjoy the 30 minutes of your morning that you have back.
Yes, thank you.